This is the Funds Control course, June 2015, Part 6, Budget Execution, Accounts Code Structure, and Object Classes. Budget fiscal year. Fiscal year, why? What are these mysterious parts of the budget structure we keep hearing about? We'll even answer the age-old question, which came first, the fiscal year or the budget fiscal year? But off the record, your FCOs, you've got to understand completely your account number, what it means, whether it's right. All your managers are counting on you to be sure you get it right and you understand it, and Joe's going to help you do that.
Okay. So why is it so important to know the structure of the agency's account code? And I'm going to go through and try to detail as much. We're really going to get down into what the codes are, what they represent. If you have a question, let me know. If you want to break it up, also let me know. It's kind of a lot of information. But just yesterday, I got an email, and I get an email about a couple a week regarding codes, how things are funded in the system, or how they're coded in the system, where they can find it in the system, all these relative things around our account code structure. And so the next several slides are going to try to clarify some of the major points that we control on, that we report out on, and that Congress is looking at. So there are six main, there are a lot more, but there are six main elements, you could say, to the account code structure. And the first is the budget fiscal year. Second is the appropriation code, what we've gone over in detail before. The budget organization code, which we'll talk about later, but it's really, that's getting down to your office level details. Number 4, PRC, we'll devote a lot of time to that in the upcoming slides, is the most important aspect of the account code structure, hands down, period, stop. This is what our reports, we have several reports which we're required to report out to OMB and the Congress out quarterly, some monthly, and it's this PRC, this program results code, that we're getting down to, is what we're reporting out on. Site project field and the cost organization field. Those are two sites Barb Murphy will get into more. Okay, so the beginning budget fiscal year and the fiscal year, what do these all represent? So for our 2-year funds and everything in the system, let me preface all these fiscal years I'm going to throw out there. In Compass, the decision that we have made is to only issue funds, so in Compass, in the current year and in the prior year. So whenever you run any reports, you should only see up-to-date, current, valid information for BFY 14 and BFY 15. Next year it will be BFY 15 and BFY 16. For those prior years beforehand, what we've done, we've gone in through our carryover process and wiped them all out. And we'll get into that in a lot more detail. But so for our 2-year funds and our no-year funds, our BFY is 2014 for carryover, and NOA begins with 15. Oh, yep. No, we're just going back for a second. Okay, so then we have all these different codes in there. And, we've talked about S&T, Superfund, and that's the name base, but we're trying to keep track of all of these in the system, and we give them all different codes. So on this slide right here, you can see the different types of fund codes that are assigned. It's completely random, so there's no reason really why EPM got B, but these are the codes that are assigned to each appropriation. STAG, we mentioned we break up into 4 components. So there you get E1, E2, E3, and E4. On the sub-appropriation side, you also see that there's a D and that there are Rs. We'll be talking about reimbursables tomorrow, but anything that ends, any fund that ends in an R is going to be your reimbursable fund. So regular Superfund is T, Superfund reimbursable is TR. And Superfund recertified money, we're going to be talking about de-obligations and recertifications tomorrow as well. Those are going to be coded with a D in the system. And this is all relevant because go back to our discussion on the apportionment. We're apportioned our regular money, but we're also apportioned reimbursable. We get an apportionment amount for our reimbursables, and we also get an apportionment amount on how much we can request back of our deobs. That's why we have to give it the TD. Okay, so who has seen at least T, TC, and TD in the Compass financial system and kind of sometimes scratches their head, what's going on, what is this? And some days I have to do that. Superfund regular, if we're just talking about the appropriation, T, we have our NOA, our new obligational authority, which is 15. The way we handle carryover, and I believe we'll get into carryover more, but if we don't, the way we handle carryover is we treat no-year funds just like your EPM funds. They're automatically going to roll over in that first carryover year and be available for you to spend them on October 1. So Superfund carryover from 14 is still a T, and you can spend on it. There are no restrictions on it. It's all yours. 2014 TC is, remember I said we're only really giving out funds in 14 and 15? 14 TC are all those funds from 13 and prior that we've gone out, swept them up, and now we're holding them within the Office of Budget to reprioritize. And if your office were to get some of those funds back in Superfund, it would be TC 2014. That represents 2013 and prior funds. And then our recerts are also handed back in the prior year. So 2014 TD are recerts.
What's a research?
Recertification of de-obligated money, and we'll get into that later. So that's kind of how the structure works. Again, and this is what we get questions on, and I got a question yesterday. 1415 is the only information, when you're running a CDW report, status funds, that's the funds you should be looking at, 14 and 15. Whether it's T, TC, TD, might represent something completely different. All right, so also when you guys are funding something on a PR, I believe you also have to include the Treasury account symbol, if I'm correct.
Definitely for a grant.
Definitely for a grant. I think mostly everything you guys have to put on the Treasury symbol. Not everything? Not everything? Okay. So for some things, though, you have to. I'll go through this slide pretty quickly. On the right side of the slide right here, basic formulation, the first three, 068. 68 is our agency identifier. Everything's going to begin with that. If it has 15/16, that means it's a multi-year fund. If it's an X, that identifies that it's a no-year fund. And the last four digits are the digits that Treasury has given to it. And that's all what they are. And so again, this is kind of what I just spelled out. Agency identifier, are they multi-year or no year? And then this specific 08, 01, 08 is EPM, again, given by Treasury.
Hey, Joe, I want to mention something about carryover. Now, Joe mentioned carryover, that's money that's available, either no-year money or two-year money that we didn't spend the first year, and we have the next year to spend it at an agency-wide level. And this is kind of an important concept that your managers should be aware of it, your senior budget officers or regional comptrollers. You as FCOs ought to be aware of it also. You have 2 years to spend your two-year money. Is there some reason why you would want to spend almost all of it in the first year? Someone have an idea? Congress gave us 2 years. Do we just take our time spending the money?
Yeah.
Why not? Why wouldn't we? Do we have a mic? Back there. So Teresa, what do we got? You don't want any ULOs? I'll take a different answer, but you're correct, we don't want ULOs, it's not related to carryover. Carryover money is money that is unobligated. We have a comment. Monica?
If Congress give you a budget to use within a period of a year, you should try to use as much of it as possible, because what you have left over, they're going to feel as though you didn't need it, and you're getting an additional budget, so you're going to have to spend that money too.
Okay, so Congress might feel, well, if you didn't spend it in the first year, maybe you didn't need it, and maybe you don't need as much money. But it's 2-year money. What, Jason, did you want to say something?
I was just gonna pick
Wait
up
for the
what
mic.
Monica was putting
Wait for the
out.
mic.
I was gonna kind of put in where Monica was saying, if you don't spend the money in 14, 15 money, if you don't spend it in 14, you might not get as much money in 15, 16, because they feel like you don't need it because you didn't spend it the year before.
Okay, and there could be, those are kind of all good comments. They may be looking at that. And realistically, here's the way you look at it. If Congress needs money, which they do every year, they're always looking for money. And one of the ways they get money is money that hasn't been spent. If it's not spent, it might be available for the taking. Let me go back to the shutdown. Remember, we had a shutdown a year ago or 2 years ago because of sequestration. And that wasn't good. We didn't have enough money because of the whole thing. The next year, Bob Perciasepe, our deputy administrator, decided, hey, we're going to make it a priority not to have to furlough people again the next year. So we may move some money from some areas to protect our workforce. And if he has to move some money, where might he get it from? He might look at who didn't spend money the prior year. And that's where he's looking. If Region 1 had spent all their money and he needed to pull some money back, he can't pull any back from Region 1 because they spent it all. But he can pull it back from everybody else. Same thing when we're looking at rescissions. Rescission is when Congress takes back money they already gave it to us. If they're looking for money, they'll look at where it's sitting. If one RPIO, or an RPIO is like the 12 headquarters, it's a 13 headquarters NPM or 13 AA ships in the regions, they're looking for money where it's sitting. So even though we have 2 years to spend the money, or no year money, the agency, by kind of we're stuck, we have to look at where money is not spent. So if I'm a program office, I want to make every possible effort to get it out the door year one to kind of help protect me. If it's spent year one, you're safe. If it's not, it's an issue. Now back to what Monica was saying, what she was saying is really related to payroll. Our payroll money is for 1 year. So if we don't spend it the first year, and this is what we're doing now, and I don't know how this may change over the years, basically, if you don't spend all your payroll money, then that's what Congress gave us that money, then we used to be able to move it to something else. Now we really don't have that flexibility. That helps fund payroll the next year, and then our payroll would be reduced the next year. So everyone's looking very carefully, even though we have 2 years or it's no year money, valuable for you all to see if you can get it out the door the first year. And let's go back again to what I talked about, why you might not want September 30th end dates on your contracts and grants or whatever, because you're trying to get everything out the door by the end of the year, and our contracts and grants folks are already busy dealing with everything, so they don't want to be dealing with renewing contracts at the last minute also. Joe.
So the budget order code is a special character that may be set up for you, may be given to you, and it's 8 characters. And I know Barb Murphy is definitely going to talk about this, so I'm just going to mention a few things that we use this code for. And that is the earmark add-on code. We no longer get any earmarks, but if we do, and for the current ones that we have, they're at the last, you can find them by the last 3 digits of their OR code. Superfund site allowance, if any of you work with Superfund and specifically have any sites that you're currently working on, this is where that site allowance goes. And then what happens when sometimes we get a hurricane that comes in, and because of that hurricane, we get a supplemental. In the case of Hurricane Katrina, Congress appropriated us additional funds, which we call a supplemental, and they also want us to track those. They're separate from everything else, and so we would put an add-on code, and we would identify those codes through this tracking device, this mechanism. And any reimbursable IDs can also be established through here. So here is a Encompass. If you're a new user and you're trying to figure out the details, you can always go to Reference Dimensions, Encompass, and enter in any code you really want, depending on what it is. But you enter it in, and it will give you the name, it will give you the short name, and the code specified with it. So that's just how to Encompass. All right, so now, as I mentioned before, this is the fourth element of our account code structure, and it is the most important. And it is the PRC, our program results code. And as you see along the bottom of the screen, it is made up of several different elements in the agency, and those elements all come together to define what the work is and who we are as an agency. So we have the goals. We have objectives, the NPM that you work for or that it's associated with, the program project, and then I'll identify at the very end what this not used / RPIO activity, these last characters, 7, 8, and 9. So how many of you have read, heard about, seen, heard rumors of the strategic plan? All right, most of us have. And so that identifies the 5 goals. I believe it's updated every 3 or 4 years. And it identifies the 5 strategic goals of the agency. And so here we have a list of those 5.
Strategic plan, everybody?
Richard's holding up a copy of our latest strategic plan.
Got a close-up on this? It's not necessary, but okay.
And then under that goal, we also have in there are several sub-objectives and also objectives. It's the first 2 elements, the goal and the objective, that specify what the work is and then what specifically that work is under that goal. That make up the first 2 elements of the PRC, the goal. And so when you're entering that in there, if you are entering a PRC or if you're looking at a PRC, it's 6 digits. The first code, the first very digit, is the goal. Digits 2 and 3 are the objective. And I believe we'll have a printout of that later. So do you guys all know the NPMs that you work for? You should know what offices you work in. And then do you know the code of that office for which you work for? So, and again, most of you should be answering your head yes.
Joe, can you cover what an NPM stands for?
Right, okay. So an NPM is a National Program Manager. I believe there are 13 or so, 12 or 13 in the agency, Office of Water and Air, and as you can see, they're on the screen right here. And these are the NPMs, the program managers that are responsible for certain sections of our mission. Obviously, water, air, toxics. But we also have OCFO, OEI, Office of Environmental Information, which are supporting. And so these are the NPMs. The code of which is identified would be that 4th digit in the PRC. And then we get to the program project. And again, a great resource, I want to emphasize it here again, and we'll reemphasize it a lot, is the program project description book. We get a lot of questions about where can I go to find a brief description, or is it appropriate to be using this specific program project? The program project description book lists the authorization, lists office contacts, lists the appropriations that it can be used under. It has a lot of great information that it can be spread widely across different types of fields and for different types of knowledge that you might need. whether it's authorization or just if you're looking up for a contact to ask a question for. So this is the most critical aspect of the program of the PRC, and it describes specifically what the EPA does. And down here we also have program area. Several years ago, agency made a decision to try to move away, I guess, from program projects and clump similar ones together. Well, Congress and OMB looked at this and they said, hey, that's a great idea, but in addition, we want you to keep those program projects. So the program areas are just an additional element of control. And the program area, there may be 2 program projects that fit in a program area, or there may be 6 or 7. It's just like-minded mission statements. So if you're using a 9-digit PRC, the 7th character is open, meaning it's not being used at this moment, and we just put in an X. It used to be for the agency activity code. We thought OMB or the Hill was going to require us to report out on it. Over all the years that we had it in, no one ever asked for a report. So now we just have it opened up as an available space in case we do need to report or control on something else. So for the time being, it is only an X. And the RPIO activity is when we get down to sub-program projects or agency activity codes that specific offices use to further control and budget and spend money. So any questions on the PRC? So this slide right here kind of is the example of what it looks like. We have our goal in the first digit, and that might be taking action on climate change and improving air quality. And then under it, the sub-objective, or the objective, is addressing climate change. That would make sense that it's in the Office of Air and Radiation, which is NPMA. The program project is Climate Protection Program. 46 is the code that we gave it. And if they were budgeting by Energy Star, there would be an X, again, in that open spot, and P3 would be in the last digits, 8 and 9. Again, this is the most important aspect of our budget structure, and this is what we report to Congress on. So they're seeing all of these elements. And I believe the next few slides, again, for new users who are not used to Compass or using it for a first time, you can easily look up PRCs or portions of PRCs by going to reference dimensions and entering in the code. The great thing about Compass is that if you were to just put in a 1, and that's the only thing you know, you can put an asterisk, and it will pull up everything else. And I believe these are just more slides of Compass that I'll scroll through. And again, it will tell you the name, the code, and whether it's active or not. Okay, so were there any questions going back to the PRC? A lot of moving elements, a lot of parts. We have a question in the back.
Is there a book or something that lists all the PRCs, or a document, or you just get that from your office?
I don't know if I can get onto Lotus Notes on this computer, but what it does in the program project description book, it breaks it up by that 2-digit program project, and then it comes out, it like files down on what NPMs have it, and then it opens up into the goals that are, it eventually folds down into it. Yeah. It's in Lotus Notes. If you don't have access to the program project description book, you can send someone on our team an email and we'll send you the link. But again, that program project description book lists the 2-digit program project, but once you start digging down into the details, it will list all the information that you need. Because, for example, there are some PRCs or some program projects that have 4 or 5 different NPMs that are responsible that get a little bit of its money. And so it breaks it down when you go out through there.